time once again for another episode of the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith. I'm here with my good friend, Worm Newbie, and would-be member of the Dragon Slayers, Andy. We're continuing his first-time reading of Worm by Wildbow. Andy, any responses on that membership applications you sent in to the Dragon Slayers?
Yeah, I'm kind of on a provisional type setting right now. They want to see my ability to hack more things. So I picked up a device from the internet and I'm going to go see if I can remotely pop open some charge ports on Teslas and stuff over at the supercharger down the street and then take
Nice.
pictures and see if that'll get me in.
Good job.
All right. So we've got our continuing review of Arc 20. We'll have chapter 5 and then the final two interludes. And as far as new business, we have two comments from YouTube.
Yes, we do. We've got two. They are a little bit lengthy, but they're both pretty intriguing. So we will start off with a regular contributor, Megafire7. And Megafire says, let me pause. This, I believe, Andy, this is in response to your feelings about why Taylor wasn't a little more strategic and trying to ignore Emma and that whole dynamic there. So let's see what Megafire says.
That's how I understood it. Yeah.
But Taylor can't ignore Emma any more than any villain can act purely objectively self-interested ways. There's always the underlying psychological issues that drove any character to become who they are. And is Taylor really going to fall back to her patterns in school where she takes the long way around every time, eating lunch in the bathroom just to avoid Emma? She can't. She has to prove that she's no longer scared of her, is no longer avoiding her. And putting Emma in her place as a consequence is remarkably satisfying personally. And I still disagree with Taylor's interpretation of this confrontation with Emma or how it went down, because the principal only finds out Taylor was an undersider person of interest when Taylor says her name, which happened after Emma got put in her place. Pause there. That's a very good point. I agree with that. And yeah. I continue. Throughout this moment of justice, Taylor is experiencing massive cognitive dissonance, showing that she can't even believe it's possible for justice to be done. And the moment she hears that the principal has undersider connections, and she finally thinks things fall into place. When the real tragedy here is that justice was being done, but she couldn't recognize it. Also, it's Brockton Bay. The moment you see Bugs doing something weird, it's Skitter. Well said there, Megafire7. Megafire brings a couple of interesting counterpoints to your feelings on that situation. How do you want to respond?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And yeah, usually Megafire and I are kind of on the same page, but we may have to agree to disagree on some of this stuff. So I have a hard time remembering, because of how much has been packed into such a short chronological time, that Skitter really hasn't aged appreciably during this story. She's still in high school. But thinking about, like, if you were the scrawny kid in high school and then you went to college and you had a rival, somebody who bullied you in high school, and then you get to college and you become the star athlete and they're this scrub in the stands. If they yelled at you or whatever, you just kind of wave and move on. You've got bigger fish to fry at that point. You're looking at going pro or whatever. So I think there's still, I still have a bone to pick a little bit with Skitter, that she didn't have the bigger picture in mind. I wouldn't feel like it's running away. It's just like, do I want to stop to scrape this lint off my shoe? No, it'll rub off on its own. I got things to do. Wow, that even rhymed. I didn't plan it that way.
Nice.
I think he did have a good point about Taylor kind of letting the cat out of the bag on her own a little bit. I think that's a good point. As far as the bug thing, maybe it's just from growing up in Arizona, but I've seen plenty of bugs do weird things. And it's not even, there's no parahumans involved. I'm sure you can remember the time in our apartment back in college where there was just this roach hanging out on the wall, like he was just checking us out. And I
Yeah.
threw a book and I killed him on the wall with the book. That was weird. The roach was just in broad daylight, just hanging
Like he
out
owned
on
the
the
joint.
wall.
Like he owned the
Yeah,
joint. Yeah.
yeah. Usually you turn on the lights, those things go away. But he just put on some sunscreen and glasses or something. I don't know. But he was just, it's like, I'm just gonna hang over here. All right, I want to watch this too. And Taylor has probably learned, and we've seen in a number of these things where she's learned how to be very surreptitious with the usage of the bugs. They crawl along. It's like when you don't notice ants are in your house because they're going right along the edge of the carpet or something.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden you see one, and then you look back and you're like, holy Toledo.
Yeah.
And it turns out that somebody dropped a piece of food and they're just, having a feast or whatever. But so I guess I disagree with him a little bit on that one, or Megafire on that
All righty. Next, we hear from a new subscriber and a new contributor, Marky Sharky 76. Hey there, guys. Just found your show on the tube after a quick Twitter/X search for anything Parahumans. I'm currently coming to the end of my third audio read of the whole fantastic series, and I'm listening to your third episode. Reliving it through other people's eyes is Brill. I'm presuming he meant brilliant. Is Brill, as I've never even spoken to another human about Worm for reasons unknown. And I'm going to pause here and say, bro, how can you not?
Yeah,
Because
seriously, spread the word, man.
yeah,
Spread
because
the
I'm
worm.
there you go. And continuing on, I work in a factory, so I get so much time to listen to audio in my ears. This is why I'm going the third time around. It's a bit of a comfort blanket, if I'm honest. Anyway, hope you're both still enjoying the series. Not being up to date with the show, it's hard to know when you're going to get. It's hard to know where you are going to be by the time I get caught up. Just to say, I'm absolutely in awe of the creator of Worm and find it inspiring to create fiction of my own. Was wondering if it had that effect on either of you. Anyway, keep up the great work. Maybe I'll hear you read this comment out in the nearest future. Sending man hugs from the Potteries, England, UK. Well, thanks and welcome, Marky Sharky. As I replied on the comments there, Andy, I let them know, we're putting out roughly 2 of these a month. So I suspect Marky will be caught up to us before too long. You want to have any reply to this comment?
Sure. Yeah. As we were joking, I really think that this is an outstanding work of fiction. And when you hear about how it was written and the different machinations and the pace and that kind of thing, it's really kind of mind blowing. So I think anybody that, in the pub, on the tube, rando person on the shop floor, whatever, you see a worm in the parking lot, be like, oh, hey, that reminds me, you should read Worm. So you definitely tell people about it, because I think the vast majority of people would really enjoy this. And I agree. I think it is inspiring. I ended up writing something this last year for the first time. I've been trying for a long time and still early stages on it, but I got a complete thing done. So that was cool. And I think this exercise of going through Worm and hearing some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes definitely inspired me and contributed to how I approached it. The serial nature of the way he put it out really got me to where I was just, all right, well, I'll just try to do some each day, not thinking I'm going to like be putting it out for people to read it, but just I want to keep having an increment, kind of a self-imposed schedule, I guess, like I was publishing to myself, if that makes any sense.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think it's very inspiring. That's cool that you see that as well. Good luck to you with your writing endeavors.
Excellent. And thank you, Marky and Megafire. Appreciate you for chiming in this time around. And we want to encourage any other first timers new to the podcast. If you've got something you want to throw our way, please do. We welcome it. And now we'll start our review, picking up chapter 5. Okay. Skitter's Taylor sitting there in an enclosed room, two powerful heroes staring her down, other heroes nearby, and she's got them right where she wants them, right?
Well, I have to dial back my talking smack about Taylor last episode a little bit. I often have this confusion, I think, and I don't know if it's very common or not, but there's, strategy and there's tactics. And I tend to think that somebody who's going to excel in one of them will excel in both. And that's not always the case. And I think what we're seeing here is that Skitter's sweet spot is tactics, thinking on her feet, coming up with something in the moment. She may have not thought out strategically what it looked like to go to school and what might happen and all that kind of thing, and planned around it and weighed the pros and cons and decided what to do ahead of time. But in the moment, she's a master at being able to figure out where she can find leverage, or trying to figure out why things are the way they are. Why didn't they just automatically spray her with foam as soon as they came in? They could have done that. I mean, if they were going to out her anyway, they could have just pinned her down instantly, game over, and, on to the next interlude or whatever. But that wasn't happening. So that immediately got her wheels turning. Well, what's going on here? And then she's thinking and thinking and putting out little feelers, it's kind of a bug reference.
Yeah.
Trying to tease out of them what's going on. And this was a masterful display.
And all the time digging in her utility kit, her mental utility kit, and her bugs, trying to see what's available to her, what may provide the best options in this situation. As we're looking at this from the conversation between Defiant and Dragon and Skitter, when you were reading this, did you catch that undercurrent from Dragon that maybe she wasn't doing this because she wanted to?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we find out later she was ordered, but
Yeah, it definitely seemed it didn't have the typical Dragon feel to it. Dragon is very decisive. She's figured out everything she wants to do. And I think about those where all the suits were coming in and they all had different capabilities, and this was used to do this and this was used to do that. And she was very strategic and really tries to figure out all the possibilities and come up with countermeasures for everything. And here instead, she's just kind of back on her heels a little bit and doesn't seem all the way on board with what's going on. I think she even says something, this isn't how we wanted it to go down or something. And it's like, since when does Dragon not do what she wants to do or what it wants to do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a computer is programmed, so it's going to do what it wants to do. So it just seems off the bat. Yeah.
Out of character for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the confluence of events here. Throughout this whole story, fate has conspired against the idea of Taylor being a hero in what apparently was a well-meaning gesture. Defiant and Dragon were actually coming to Brockton Bay to talk to her. Now we can speculate on the reasons. Obviously, it wasn't to come take her in custody, not from the conversation that we had, but events, leadership from the PRT ended up commandeering their plan to have a nice sit-down chat, and they forced her into a corner, and she came out. I mean, she didn't come out swinging, but she came out more Skitter and less Taylor.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way, maybe this is what you're getting at, but that's kind of the way that things forced her to be.
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Once they expose her secret identity, then it's like, all right, well, now I don't now the gloves are off. I don't have any restraints now. I used to have to try to act like Taylor when I'm Taylor and act like Skitter when I'm Skitter, but now everybody knows I'm Skitter.
Hmm.
So I'm flicking the switch to full Skitter right here in school.
Well,
And
just in more of a broad sense, just yes to the point you just made, but I mean in terms of, I guess from my perspective, darn it, things are just forcing her to be this way, and I still don't
oh,
want her to be that way. So this may be my own prejudice regards to this character in this story. Fate is not allowing her to be the direct to move in the direction I prefer that she be moving in. It's just kind of me
gotcha.
whining. That's point in the story.
No,
Go
I can
ahead.
definitely see that. Yeah, that is because of everything that's gone on. Yeah, the protectorate is disjointed.
Hmm.
They're trying to get a handle on things. Again, I don't know if I've been reading this too much or whatever, but I keep having these insect memes, Taylor's the fly in the ointment. And so they
Oh,
need
you're
to do something
hooked.
about that. Yeah,
You're
I think
hooked.
so.
Oh gosh, it's found its way into under your skin, bro.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
The cell phone thing. Kids are filming this confrontation. She's yeah, she thinks to herself at one point about, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of internal thoughts she was having about. Let me see if I can organize my thoughts here. Bear with me. She related herself to a couple of villains a couple of times. She thought about how Gru once upon a time talked to her about the importance of image. And so she's not blustering, but she's presenting this aggressive facade, this confident facade that doesn't translate very well when when we get to the interlude and we see things from Danny's perspective. But anyway, how did you feel about her comparing herself to Jack Slash and Bakuda, or not directly person to person comparing herself, but seeing them in a particular situation?
I thought that was apt on a very, very limited, very focused
Right.
set of context. So yeah, and I've kind of been lobbying for that, if you will, ever since she took on the Slaughterhouse Nine. It's like, man, if I had done that, I would be just like walking down the street. Hey, check me out. Yeah, all right. No, you don't want to do that. I was the
Right.
one who took down Mannequin. Yeah, you ought to now. And so, yeah, I think it's just finally clicking that, and oftentimes we do have a blind spot to that, right? Because there's that old saying, everyone is three people, right? There's the person that they feel they are on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
There's the person they actually are, and then there's the person that everybody else sees. And the people that tend to get that confidence, get that good feeling, are people that can kind of try to merge what's on the inside and what they actually are. They become comfortable in their own skin.
Sure.
And so Taylor, I think, is getting there. And it's pretty amazing for somebody of her age. And obviously she's kind of been in a hothouse with everything going on, but she's getting to that point where it's like, well, no, I am that big a bad butt. I do warrant people being nervous and handling me with kid gloves and stuff because they're not sure. But yeah, the way she pieces everything together too, I think that's another thing that gives her the confidence. She's seen these villains be able to figure things out and
Mm-hmm.
act very well tactically and strategically. And she's doing the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, yeah, you got orders, but you don't seem like you're really bought into it. Usually you get orders and then you come up with a way to be on board.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something else. And she finally gets that thing where it's like, oh, so there's some precog action going on here.
Yeah. And before we get to that revelation, she does take a moment to pick on Emma and send a centipede scurrying across her hand.
Might as well.
Sure, yeah. At that point, yeah, okay. It's just a small thing, but I'm sure she got lots of satisfaction from that moment when Emma fell off the chair and screamed and cowered away from her. Let's crawl inside Emma's head for a moment, just for a brief
Do we
moment.
have to? Nah, I'll just look in through the window, maybe, or I'll watch the highlight video.
Remember in the previous chapter, and the point that the principal was making to Emma about these aren't the students you went to school with
Mm,
before everything went down, before Leviathan showed up. Well, guess what, Emma? Yeah, Taylor could have taken you out at any moment. So yeah, you needed to be stepping more carefully than you were. And then there's also the fact that the realization that the best friend that she turned on ended up being kind of cool.
yeah, yeah. There's all sorts to unpack there, and that unfortunately, that's something that plays out a lot in high school. Is you don't know where people are at, they don't know where they're at, and something rubs one the wrong way. There's a falling out or whatever, and then yeah, later on you're like, oh man. Anybody who's gone back to a reunion has run into that, where somebody they thought was cool is now not so cool. And then somebody who was, kind of in the background or maybe a little bit of a loner or something, or a little bit awkward, is now very successful in some way, or just very together.
Right.
And you're like, what how did that happen? But it's
Emma's
it's
kind of a
kind of like, oh, go ahead.
no. I was just gonna say Emma's gonna be dealing with a lot of regret, I think, because
If she's that deep,
um,
um, I'm worried that she's just one of those kind of shallow people, and that's not necessarily a knock on her, right? I
hmm,
mean, it's hard, and we kind of see that in a lot of ways in this whole section, where the people who have all this lived experience, who have gone through the meat grinder, have all sorts of depth to them now.
hmm,
It may not be real healthy or integrated depth, but they've got much more of a realistic view on life, I think. And so they're able to extend grace, or they're able to protect themselves better, or what have you. And Emma is just one of those people that grew up not ever needing anything. Everything she had was handed to her on a silver platter. She had one moment that was super scary,
right.
but that was not handled appropriately afterwards. And so I just don't know that Emma's, I think she's just going to be a bitter person, just one of those
Hmm.
people that tries to cling to their youthful beauty way beyond when they should be clinging to it, and just convinced that everybody's against them and it's all their fault, not taking any accountability or responsibility. But that's just me. I'm not an Emma fan.
You're not alone. Now let's talk about the sad realization of who the precog was, who gave the heroes the advice what would be the best tactic for bringing Taylor in.
Mm.
Kind of a monumental level of disappointment, to say the least, from Taylor.
Yeah, that was a gut punch, man. I mean, so much of Skitter's crusade revolved around getting Dinah to safety, and whatever it cost, to the point where she murdered somebody. And to find out that Dinah's right back where she was, maybe not getting drugged every day, but
Hmm.
I wouldn't put it past the PRT at this point.
Really?
Well, I mean, yeah, everything else that's been revealed and all the other BS that was going on, it's there. The end justifies the means for sure.
Hmm.
They might have, they probably have a plan. They probably have a binder of how they would be able to detox Dinah after the fact, and be able to make sure they could monitor that it was being administered safely and all this kind of stuff. But I wouldn't put it past them.
Okay. No respect for the PRT come from Andy at the moment, given given where. Well, then again, these people were working with. Well, no, not everybody was working with Cauldron. Anyway, let's not go down that road
The
just yet.
people who were running it
Yeah.
were working with Cauldron, and they weren't
Okay.
telling anyone. And
That's true.
that
That's true.
pissed me off. If our listeners haven't figured that out yet, I'll just lay it out there.
Taylor does find a way to actually get out of that box she's been cornered into. She gets herself a human swarm of sorts by rallying the students to, as she said, be the jury of her peers in this situation. And nearly 100 kids decide to side with her and help her peacefully make her way out of the auditorium, the cafeteria, I believe it was.
I think calling it a swarm is extremely apt. I believe that over time, as Skitter has developed her skills working with insects, that her brain has probably changed significantly. And she realizes that even though people are vastly more advanced than bugs, on all sorts of levels, that we are still interconnected. And you can still develop a tribe or a swarm, a group based on all sorts of different things. And in this instance, she leverages the shared life experiences that they've gone through, staying there. All these other people had a parachute, they were able to bail.
Right.
And you have some people who were on the outskirts and claim like they lived through it, but you really didn't. But the people who were there and had to figure out how to get water,
Sure.
stuff that we totally take for granted. Those folks realize that it's not all that the protectorate did all this stuff and they're all knights in shining armor. No offense to Defiant, and the quote unquote villains in a lot of cases did more for the people on the streets than the PRT did. And so Taylor, again, has that innate sense and is able to tap into that and leverage that. And it's pretty cool. It's very, like I said, it's a master class in tactics.
Works effectively. Works effectively. So she gets the kids to peacefully harass and kind of harangue Dragon and Defiant and Clock Blocker, and they move as a group out of the cafeteria and then out of the school. Meanwhile, she's got, as I referenced before the last episode, she's got the Nintendo game going on where she's got her swarm out there doing battle with Sear and Adamant. And I think Kid Win didn't want, she said at one point, he didn't want to go outside after having dealt with her swarm before that. So they make their way out of the school grounds. And then a few blocks later, she pauses and then she gets, the scene unfolds where she's kind of dumbfounded. She doesn't know what to say. She doesn't know how to thank them. And then the kids begin to just say, hey, as I'm looking at this one section, it says here, you saved my dad, Fern said, as if answering a question I hadn't asked. Saved her dad? When? It really didn't matter. And then some of these other kids, we get voices from the crowd recounting how Skitter, the villain, had done something to affect their lives, dealing with the ABBs, the Slaughterhouse Nine, and then and it just, I thought that was a very cool scene. The way that played out there, it's just a cacophony of voices, one thing after the other, one positive thing after the other.
Yeah, and I think that hits the nail on the head with what I was trying to touch on. Just that even though Skitter is set apart by being the Queen of Brockton Bay, or however you want to characterize it, she has this shared experience with these folks, and they realize that she had a very positive impact on them. It's not about whether, everything she did was legal or if some of the things she did was bad. We see that with people in politics. Somebody will be on a lot of people's naughty list, if you will,
Hmm.
but somebody will come forward and say, "Oh, well, they did this for me, and I was just blown away by that." And that's what that person is going to focus on, not necessarily all the other stuff. And so they've seen that Skitter cares about them. She has done things to try to stop
Evil.
violence, evil.
Yeah.
She's done things to try to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, free the captives. I mean, it's getting a
Hmm.
little bit biblical, but don't want to get into any blasphemy here. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
She's
No,
she's
point
been
taken.
there in the trenches with the people, while PRT has been up in their ivory tower, and it turns out they've been talking out of the side of their neck half the time anyway. So, but it's really cool that she figured that out. And
Hmm.
yeah, there's just all sorts of stuff. One person hands her a sweatshirt to wear so she can
Yeah.
change her appearance, and all these tricks that they've learned. I'm sure before the Endbringer event, none of these kids thought about, oh yeah, I should switch clothes so that so and so can't find me. But now they know that because they
Right.
lived through having to people chase them down the street or whatever, and they're using those skills to help out, and then they and connect with Skitter.
Yeah. And as we're moving toward the end of the end of the chapter, I wanted us to not zoom past this one issue. What's going on with Dragon?
Yeah, this is pretty weird, and we'll see more of it in the next chapter. But
Right.
the Dragons cooked up some kind of beta program, if you will, or network cloud backup system or something. I don't know what's going on, but
Hmm.
um, Defiant is genuinely worried about it, that something could go wrong, and that whatever whatever's going on isn't worth the risk. And but something is strange, and like I said, in the next chapter we'll see more evidence of that.
Yeah. And we close out at the Hebert household. A pretty sad scene. Her father's at home, surrounded by authorities, cops, PRT officials. Taylor uses her swarm sense from several blocks away. Yeah, she comments that she noticed how her range had extended, and she thought about how that only happens when she normally happens when she feels trapped, but she wasn't trapped. And I submit to you that she was. She actually kind of was inside of
Mm,
a metaphorical trap. What do you
mm.
think?
That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. This is like one of her worst nightmares, is
Hmm.
that she's she's been outed, and now her this could be the last goodbye.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, this was a very poignant scene, and I agree with you. She kind of was. This was a heightened adrenaline scene, or however you
Hmm.
heightened anxiety. So that would make sense that her range would extend.
Yeah. Let me read this. This is right after she uses they notice the butterfly, and the PRT officials are jumping into action. And it says here, they spilled out of the house, orders were shouted, and people climbed into cars peeling out. Still at the kitchen table, my dad reached out for the butterfly. It settled on his finger. Cliche, overdramatic, probably. But I couldn't bear for our possible last contact with my dad to be through anything ugly. Taylor, he said, 6.5 city blocks away, I replied, I'm sorry. The butterfly and I took off at the same time. Boy. So let's see if I can pose a question to you about this. Um, how bad is this for the Heberts? Is this irreparable?
Oh man. Well, I tried to put myself in this position of being the dad, and if my son were outed as some kind of criminal in this context,
Hmm.
I think Danny's a pretty smart guy, and I think he has been around the block enough to know. I'm sure working in the kind of contracts and stuff on the docks and stuff that he did, that there's no such thing as 100% good guy, 100% bad guy. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're taking money away from this project to pay for that project, and then that funds this contract, and
Sure.
that's good for the docs, but it's bad for the boys and girls clubs on the other side of town or whatever. And so
Hmm.
I think it'd be really hard at first, but I think eventually he'd come to realize that even though Taylor has changed a ton, there's still that core that's the same kid that he remembers and loves. Going back to, as she was leaving the building, she pointed out to Kid Win where his stuff was.
True.
She cared about him getting his stuff back, and also that no knucklehead would get it and hurt themselves or hurt others with it. And so even in the midst of this super tense march through the gauntlet kind of thing, she's worried about these other folks, and she's caring. And so I think Danny would come to recognize that and be able to say, yeah, all this happened, but it was because she cared. She
Hmm.
was trying to protect this person or trying to save these people. And so I think it'd take a while, but I think he'd come around.
Okay. We shall see. And now we will move on to interlude 20, bonus interlude number one. And we pick up with Stan and his reporting crew as they're getting ready to try to find out some information as to what happened earlier in the day at Arcadia High School. Stan's a field reporter. He's got a producer and a driver with him, and they're parked on a hill, getting themselves together, getting ready to head down to the school. Did you like this tool to advance the story? I don't think we've seen a point of view from a reporter in this story.
I liked it. I didn't really focus too much on Stan
Uh huh.
and what he was doing, but I liked that it set the stage. So it's like, okay, who's how's this person reacting that's seeing this now? So I thought that was a good vehicle to set that whole thing.
Yeah, we get some introductions. We get some find out who his crew is. That's Marshall and Nipper who are helping him out there. He goes and tries to get permission from the principal to interview kids on campus, and she's not having any of it. She, I like her. I like her. She's like, okay, Mr. Vickers, what's your name? I really can't be bothered with you. Leave my kids alone. Go away.
Yeah, I think she does a good job on that. I think Stan does a good job too, though. He's
Yeah.
hustling, he's
Right.
coming up with good things, and I've soured on journalism in general
Yeah. Who hasn't?
over a period of time. I was just talking with a coworker today about how storms now get a name. It used to only be hurricanes got a name, but
Right.
now a winter storm gets a name. It's like, why do we need to name a storm? You and I, we went to school where it snows. There was
Mm-hmm.
no naming of storms. It was just a blip on the news unless it was going to be like 3 feet in the next 6 hours and the school was going to shut down. Freezing rain, it's freezing rain tonight. Bundle up, be careful. Thanks. Now to sports. But
Yeah.
now, everything is just blown out of proportion.
Sure.
But Stan and the journalists here are in the middle of something that really is all that. It's worth all the hype. There's always something going down. So it doesn't seem like he's overdoing it or anything, but I think he's doing a good job and he's a good salesman trying to, well, you'd owe me, I'd owe you a favor, and
Right.
I could, but
Yeah, I think you're right. He's he's a professional. He's hustling. He's trying to get the story. Yeah, it's just as you said, the general opinion of journalists at the moment is not very high, but we'll try not to dwell on that. So
Yeah.
he does interview a few girls. He gets some information from them. Marshall shows up with cell phone video, and then he returns with a young man in tow, and he's got a story.
Yeah, that's interesting closing of a loop there. It's like
Right.
Taylor had to show up because this guy, and now he's there kind of giving the scoop. But it makes sense. He feels bad. I think it says he's, kind of got that hangdog look about him.
Mm-hmm.
He's really, I'm sure, in all the different ways he thought this was play out, it was this.
No, because you never got the impression that he was. Well, he said so himself in that previous arc or chapter. He wanted to help. He was like, "Hey, if I figured it
Mm,
out, anybody could figure it out. I'm just trying to warn you." But as you said, this was a closing of a loop, and it worked here in the story. So
mhm.
we followed through this section of the interlude where Stan and his team are putting everything together, and then the story moves forward to where we begin getting some different points of view from some characters as the story is being broadcast. The report is being broadcast to the world, and we start off with Miss Sophia in Juvie, and boy, does she lose it.
Well, yeah, this is like here she thought she was all that, and
Mm-hmm.
and now she's fallen so far only to see the person that she used to just totally look down on being the center, and all these things fall into place, and she's just like, oh my gosh. I thought this day started off bad. I didn't think it'd get any worse, but yeah, this is worse.
Yeah, she as it says here, she screams something so incoherent that even she would have been hard pressed to interpret it. Yeah, Sophia, there you go. Yeah, okay.
If anybody deserves it, it's Sophia. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yes, no disagreement there. Then the story moves to another scene, and it's inside the Huberts household.
mm,
And thank God for Kurt and Lacey, right? There, if ever Danny needed a lifeline, boy,
for sure. Yeah, they're definitely helping him out, and they're trying to keep each other on track so they're not pouring any salt on the wounds or anything, or saying the wrong thing.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's got to be a huge support for Danny, and
Yeah, because I
he
mean,
needs it right now.
yeah, throughout this little project of ours, we've constantly referred back to the difficulty of being a single parent, how difficult it must have been for him, and
Mm,
having lost this woman who we find out thanks to Emma's evilness, who he thought was too good for him, and, losing the love of his life, trying as best he could to support Taylor through the bullying and so forth, and now to see her in his eyes having fallen to this situation, and he wonders if he's to blame for it, which is a perfectly, I think, normal response for a parent whose child has fallen into criminality of any kind, I would imagine.
for sure. Yeah, and even just any kind of poor decision making, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We as parents, we always question ourselves, what could we have done differently?
Mm-hmm.
Something that is really hard to think of in the moment, but I think in hindsight is important, and I think most parenting books would bear me out, and that is that an integral part of growing up is having your kids be able to make their own decisions and sometimes suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
And you don't want somebody to turn out like Emma because you're always doing everything for them and protecting them from everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can't go too far the other way. We've seen plenty of examples in the media about that where it's like you need a license to have a pet, you need a license to drive a car, but you don't need a license to have a kid.
Right.
There ought to be some kind of thing that there's a welfare check or something just to show that folks are taking their responsibilities seriously, because it seems like there are some folks who just kind of, oh yeah, I brought them into this world, I did my work, that's it, they're
Mm-hmm,
on their own.
mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry to get preachy there, but yeah, Danny's got to question if it's something that he did. But I think again, in hindsight, as he processes through that, he'll realize that he did a lot of good work,
Mm-hmm.
because even though Skitter was faced with tons of tough decisions and she made some pretty scary choices, in the end, she stayed true to herself. And that is a testament to how she was raised.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. There's still a lot of her dad in there, and
Exactly.
how he brought her up. So Kurt and Lacey talk to Danny and say, hey, maybe it's best that you're not alone. I agree with that. And yeah, we're gonna stick by you. We're your friends. We're here to support you. And why don't you come stay with us for a little bit? And yeah, that's just all goodness from them.
For
And then
sure.
the scene shifts to the PRT HQ. And guess who's back? Pigot.
Uh, Good old Pigot. Yeah.
Boy, there's a whole lot of PRT directors in here, and they're questioning Defiant and Dragon. And yeah, Chief Director Costa Brown is on the phone or on the camera from DC, and this new guy Tag is maybe wanting to point fingers at Dragon and Defiant.
It sounds like it. Yeah. And Defiant's not having any of it. And for once, I kind of agree with him. It's typical. So there's an acronym in the military, REMF, rear echelon. I'll let you fill in the other parts, but it refers
Yeah.
to the generals that sit behind the desk and tell people
Uh-huh.
to go out and fall on the bayonet on the front lines, and Tag strikes me as one of those folks, that he's just, I mean, he's not in a good spot anyway. I wouldn't want his job for sure after what's gone down, but
Mhm.
he is there and he could be handling it better. And instead he's questioning the people who are boots on the ground. It's like, dude, you were back here in the air conditioned office. Why don't you just shut up?
Yeah, we get a couple of scenes from inside Pigot's thought process where she's kind of having a little bit of Schadenfreude, kind of like I told you guys, if she dies in combat or if she turns against us, this could be a problem. I warned you.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting to see that. And also, just as we had touched on, that they start trying to question Dragon and she doesn't respond. And Pigot picks up on that. And, she's like, well, what's going on there? So
Yeah.
more evidence that Dragon is not, maybe not even all there somehow.
So there's something going on with dragons that yeah we will have to see. Yeah, and she even noticed how Defiant had a little hint of emotion in his voice when talking about she's not quite herself as a result of this visit to Brockton Bay, but hopefully she'll be okay in a few days. And Pigot picked up on what's going on there between these two. Interesting dynamic. I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah, the cyborg and the AI are they a thing? I mean, I think I've
Well,
even asked that
yeah,
question before.
yeah. I mean, it seemed like it has been coming from that or
Hmm.
heading that direction for quite a while. It's definitely a mutual admiration society.
Sure.
But yeah, you've got, from what we saw, as creepy as it was, Dragon is not 100% machine,
Hmm.
and Defiant isn't 100% human anymore. They're definitely moving toward each other on that kind of man machine interface, if you will, spectrum. So, well, it seems like things are getting more connected between the two of them.
Now, that sound you hear in the background is the strain of the PRT as an organization. It's its pillars beginning to crumble. And Yeah, Defiant trying to play the, well, we want some full transparency. And if we don't get these things, maybe me and Dragon move on. And that's where director Costa Brown says, well, y'all go ahead because we got Saint and the Dragon Slayers on speed dial.
That was quite a twist there. Yeah. It was kind of like, well, I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But man, what is the world coming to?
Yeah, well, desperate times calling for desperate measures, and the PRT as an organization, like I said, it's kind of crumbling, and they're just like, hey, not a problem. If y'all want to go on, then we can deal with the Dragon Slayers. And the final group that we hear from in this during this report from Stan is the Slaughterhouse Nine. What in the wide world of sports do you think they're up to?
First of all, I have trouble even picturing them watching television. I mean, it's just like, oh,
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
It's like, shouldn't you all be out stabbing something, or aren't there enough bodies around for you to cobble something together? I mean, you need to watch stuff on TV for entertainment. You don't seem like the type, but I guess they got to stay hooked into current events.
Sure.
So that makes sense. But it was very mentally jarring for me to think of that. Hey, let's watch Friends. Sorry, dating myself there. Let's watch Young Sheldon. That's more.
There you go. But something's going on. They're in some place. There's rows and rows of vats for growing something. And Bonesaw is doing something to Hook Wolf, getting him inside of some kind of container. Then Jack, and I said at one point when the device was activated and was flashing, you could see row upon row of glass cases. Each row was marked crawler. 10 iterations of that, and then the next one was Siberian, and 10 of that, and then Chuckles. This just doesn't sound good.
No, it reminded me a little bit of some of those cheesy old Star Trek episodes where they were like trying to move one person's mind into the other body and stuff and do a swap, and I'm just wondering if they're trying to make some kind of super parahumans, somehow taking stuff out of all of them and pumping it into a vat and generating something that has all sorts of different capabilities. I don't know. It's just,
remember the scenario though. Let's see if this helps you some. So remember, she raided Blasto's lab that Accord had set up, and Accord had access to that PRT database, with all the genome from various members of the Nine and so forth. And we know that Blasto is a biological tinker, and she grabbed some of his materials for growing things. Bonesaw did when she hacked his body by that whole scene.
Right, and he's still there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's having to work the levers and stuff, which is so messed up. I mean, that's next level messed up. But yeah, I think you're right. Bonesaw was kind of doing the whole Dr. Frankenstein thing, assembling stuff from different people, and now she's just going to a molecular level and trying to, I think, extract stuff out of people and connect it somehow, get it to bond together at a lower level, a cellular level. So it's this can't be good.
So that brings us to the end of this interlude. And we're moving on into the final interlude, the final part of our episode that we will cover in closing out Arc 20. And we're picking up things with Accord. And he's our POV for this interlude. Let me ask you something. We got kind of a cursory introduction to him during the Traveler's arc. He reappeared a little bit later on, and now we get a full fleshed out, fully fledged view of him. Does Accord come off a little more frightening to you than Coil?
No, I wouldn't say so. At least not at the beginning of this chapter. By the end of the chapter, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, I frankly just found him annoying.
Oh, really?
He seemed like, so when we had talked about Tattletale
Mm-hmm.
early on, she described how, or at least I envisioned it. I don't know if Worm used these exact words, but she would see all these branching potentialities, all these different things that could happen. Oh, maybe this is why, and
Mm-hmm.
it was easy for her to just follow one all the way down the rabbit hole. And she had to learn to dial it back. And so at the beginning of this chapter, Accord seems like he wasn't as successful with that, that he just kind of, the potentialities that he sees and everything, every little thing that bothers him a little bit or things
Mm-hmm.
that bother him a lot, he goes off into this fugue state where he just starts, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that.
So
And
this
to the
is
point where,
ADD dialed up to 11, thrown in with a superpower.
and yeah, and an evil genius. Yeah. And so it's just kind of, he doesn't like that the gallery is asymmetric.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of symmetry. I recognize that asymmetrical things can also be beautiful and have their own positive qualities, but it's not the thing that I gravitate towards. But this guy is just like, whoa. I mean, if you look at any person,
Mm-hmm.
they're not symmetric. I mean, all you have to do is hold a mirror up to your face, perpendicular to your nose, and you'll see that the two sides of your face aren't mirror images of each other. If you look at some celebrities that you think, wow, that person's really attractive or whatever, that you look closer, you're like, oh my gosh, their eye, one eye is significantly lower than the other eye. That doesn't look right when I can't not see it. And so for him to just get hung up on this kind of stuff over and over again was a little bit, okay. And then later on, he starts getting upset with the way people say things, but then he says things that are not what I would say the grammatically preferred way of saying things. And it's
It's,
like,
it's, that's fascinating because um, this time through, I don't know what it is, but this time reading, prepping for our episode, he just came off. It just hit me as being frightening, as being much
hmm,
more intense than I remember my first time through. That's really interesting. I wonder what's
yeah,
changed for me. Could it be because I don't know? I really don't know. I'm gonna have to ruminate on that for a little bit.
yeah,
Uh,
something to talk about next time.
anyway, yeah. So he and his two remaining ambassadors are joining the Undersiders, the Teeth, the Fallen, for a villain tete-a-tete inside the Forsberg Gallery. And they're there to discuss what's going to happen. Skitter and Team Undersiders are kind of laying down the law. If you're going to operate in our town, these are the rules by which you will abide.
Yeah, I think this is great. They had kind of talked about this in earlier chapters where they knew new people were going to be moving in.
Right.
They had to figure out how they were going to all work together or not work together. And there were some precedents in kind of the villain community. If somebody moved into an area, there was usually some kind of tribute that was paid or
Mm-hmm.
something. And so they're just trying to work that out. But it's instead of just everybody kind of showing up and people are packing guns or whatever, they're packing powers. And so it's a whole nother level of possible violence and mayhem going on. And I think the Undersiders handle it really well. Tattletale is a great person to have on your team in this kind of instance, and really trying to figure out what motivates people and what could happen and that kind of thing. And then Skitter's got that master level tactics where she's able to think on her feet, and they've planned some stuff out, but she's able to kind of be real agile about it too.
yeah, Accord as our POV character, he recognizes some of the traps. He sees these silk lines running from some of the folks who are in the room. And we know, yeah, he's wondering what counterweight she had on the other end of
Mm,
that. And of course, we know that it's more than likely Atlas sitting outside with
yeah.
this stuff ready to yank whoever's the bad guy of the moment out the door and let out the window and let them fall to their death.
Yeah.
How about that butcher character? Sound pretty unique. Someone who was the 14th iteration of this character.
So when they first introduced the character, I already found it kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was just because super strength is kind of one of those things that it's like, wow, that's always kind of a big deal. And just casually drop this giant Gatling gun on the table. But then, yeah, as it moves forward and they start talking about this transfer of powers, it harkens back a little bit to the previous interlude. And you're like, oh, this maybe Bonesaw is kind of tapping into something like this, where people can kind
Mm-hmm.
of inherit these things from other people in a partial way. But then to be the 14th one, yeah, so
Pretty intimidating.
it's very intimidating, but it's also I think they focus too much on, oh wow, well that's 14 different voices you have to contend with. But it's also 13 other or 14, no, they're the 14th, so 13 other voices. They've also had that much experience with dealing with it. So you probably learn, just like these folks do, like Tattletale and other folks, Skitter, you learn to filter out the noise and control things a little bit. Otherwise, as they say, one of the folks went mad. So you learn from those mistakes, I would think, as things are inherited, just like evolution. There's going to be some improvement over time.
Right. So, and I wondered, oh, crap, I may have missed this in the writing. The the rules of engagement that Skitter and the Undersiders were laying down for the teeth and so forth, the operating procedures, were those deliberately? Do you think? Did you feel they were set such that those were people were going to reject it, and that Accord would be the only one who would accept the terms?
Oh, that's an interesting take. Um,
I don't have an
that
answer. I'm just wondering if that was. Am I seeing something there?
I think that could be part of it. I mean, Tattletale again here is crucial to this whole
Yeah.
negotiation, and so I'm sure there was a lot of research and pondering on her part, trying to figure out what would be the best dynamic.
Hmm.
Who would fit in the best, who was going to be a team player, who's going to be problematic. And then, yeah, she's definitely used what she has learned to either try to learn more or to try to manipulate folks. And so I could see that happening. Yeah.
All right. So during the negotiations, yeah, the teeth and the fallen say, you know what, we're not playing your reindeer games. We're out. And Butcher promises she's going to kill Skitter. So sounds like we'll be seeing Butcher again. Accord decides that, yeah, he's going to stick around. He's going to follow the rules for now. Yes. Um, he's decided he was going to solve world hunger using his power, and nobody wanted to take him seriously, and it kind of set him off.
Yeah, that reminded me of Mannequin a little bit. You have folks that are trying to solve a problem, which if people took the time to think about it, would people would readily acknowledge it is a big problem. One of the issues in our world is that the bigger the problem, the more it can have a tendency to kind of fade into the background because it is perceived as overwhelming or
Mm-hmm.
unsolvable. And in some cases, there might be some truth to that. But here you have somebody who's like a human gray computer, and they're pondering all this, they're working through all this, and they come up with a solution, and it's discounted. And in my opinion, cynic that I probably am, it's based on greed. There's no money to be made probably in solving world hunger, at least not in the short term. The stockholders are not going to be happy with the bottom line the first few years of that kind of project. But that's a big issue, is that people focus on the short term too much.
Yeah.
Accord's got this major long range plan. And once I had read the part where it said that he had solved world hunger and everything, then I started thinking, well, and I think they even mentioned that Tattletale probably said something to Skitter about Accord's long term plans. And that's why Skitter thinks Accord will agree to things. Then I'm thinking, all right, well, there's probably more to this long term plan than has been opened up so far. And sure enough, we find that out later.
And as we're moving further into the chapter, actually toward the end, so the meeting's over and Accord decides he needs to add numbers to his ambassadors because he's only got the two, and he gets 5 of his top level employees and tells them that they're going to be promoted now and they're going to become his ambassadors. And after they depart, dude picks up his phone, calls up Cauldron, orders up some vials, just like he's ordering, a meat lover's pizza or something from Domino's.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I expected the dude to come out and just have open up his lab coat, just have their little slots on the inside. So, I got some really good stuff here. You sure you don't want to go for I got a 3 for $5 deal,
So that's taking it to the next level. I mean, he sounds like he's a regular customer of Cauldron, and as a matter of fact, he knew Coil. That's right. Well, obviously we knew that, and we get reminded of that fact that Coil sold him the database and that they were actually friends. And he comments on the fact that very few people earn the title of being his friend, and that's another interesting look into his personality. As we're heading toward the end of the chapter here, he's looking at the overall situation, realizing the role that the Undersiders are going to play in this, and wondering if Skitter, if she has any idea how big a player she is going to be in this whole grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And I don't know, something about the way Accord thought about Coil made me think that there was something there where, and he even kind of says, well, the Undersiders will fit into the plan just as well. Like Coil was a cog in the machine. They became friends and they had aligned long-term goals, maybe, or at least they were aligned for part of the time. But it was almost like, yeah, I've got this picture of Oz, that Coil was the Wizard of Oz, but Accord was the man behind the curtain. And
interesting.
Not only a big customer of Cauldron, but maybe a page, he helped them get their start kind of thing, that
really?
was part of his plan. It just seems like his web is kind of in the shadows, and it's way more vast than I expected.
Well, let's see what comes of that thought process. So that brings us to the end of the arc. And as you roll into your overall impressions, I want you to see if you can consider this question as you're discussing this. Do you think this portion of the arc did a good job kind of resetting the chessboard, as it were? It seems like we're at kind of an inflection point. And did you think this was effective, especially this last interlude kind of thing? Why don't you ponder that as you give me your overall impressions of the arc?
Okay. I thought it was kind of a mixed bag, I guess, for an arc as I was reading it. But then looking back over it, I can see where, as an author, Worm is trying to, I think, reset the chessboard is a good way to put it. We knew other folks were moving in, we knew there's going to be kind of a new chapter in things. And so you can't have, you can't keep pursuing every thread for the entirety of a story, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
threads have to kind of die off, and as others, as some descend, as others ascend. And so this is definitely a transition into kind of a new chapter in Skitter's life.
Okay.
And all the immediate threats have kind of died down. There's a lot of chaos, but there's a lot of opportunity. Things are starting to get better. It's definitely kind of turning a corner here. And so as I was reading it, I was kind of like, going back to high school, what?
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like Worm's way of saying, all right, this ends this chapter of her life. There's
I
not going to be
see.
any more school, not any more family. All these things, all these threads have been severed now, pretty much, or at least are tied off. And now we're moving into Act Two, if you will, where, yeah, Accords implying that Skitter is really going to be Queen of Brockton Bay,
Mm-hmm.
and is wondering if she's up to that coronation and whether everyone will bend the knee and say yes, she is a good queen.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like things are moving in that direction. Now there's always going to be the folks that are part of the status quo that are not going to be happy with that, and who knows how that's going to work out. But looking back, I like this arc a lot better than I did as I started.
All righty. And now it's time for Andy to announce his choice for key character of the arc. Whether hero or villain, cape or civilian, Andy will identify the characters that stood out to him, whether it's for good or ill. Andy, who's your selection and why?
Well, this is a tough one. There's a lot of, I've probably said that more than once, but this arc more than any of them, I think, because so much of it is all around Skitter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's, and that again is that transition or that turning of the corner. There's not a bunch of different people who are, oh well, this could be the main. You know, this is all Skitter now. Um, but yeah, I think as much as I am not a fan,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with Defiant.
Really?
Yeah, he is integral to what goes on even before we see him come on the scene at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And he's obviously his interaction, his relationship, if you will, with Dragon has continued to ramp up, and they're continuing to collaborate on different things. We're not sure what they are yet,
Mm-hmm.
but they're still in development, and he's willing to kind of let Dragon run with things, even against his judgment. And so, um, in the past, that wouldn't be his thing. So he's definitely improved a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also interesting that he's the one that argues against bringing in the Dragon Slayers if Defiant and Dragon decide they don't want to participate anymore. I think he's right, but yeah, it's kind of wow. That's another big change in him. So I see him growing a little bit. You know, I think back at Arms Master, he would have just kind of flown off the handle when Skitter was trying to talk her way out of the net,
Right.
and would have just taken her out, not kill her, but disable her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think he's growing, and I think he's going to play a larger role down the road, and he might turn out not as bad as we thought he was.
Okay. And that's Defiant, Andy's key character of the arc. Awesome. And with that, we will be heading out for now. Thanks everyone for joining us. Big things seem to be on the horizon for our bug girl. We hope you return as Andy discovers what lies ahead. So until next time, take care.
Thanks again for listening and for the great questions. Keep them coming. And yeah, if you're a fan of Worm, definitely let folks know, turn them on to it. It's been a very enjoyable read. I've read more books than I can count, and this one has some very unique aspects to it, which for an avid reader is always a treat. After you've read enough books, you can get a little like, oh yeah, this is gonna lots of twists and turns in Worm, and I really appreciate that. And I think your friends and family will as well. So definitely get the word out there. Have them check out Worm, and if they're so inclined and want to hear some folks talk about it, have them check out our podcast. Thanks for joining us in this podcast. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we'll hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more in the link down below. Catch you later.